over 500 American businessmen, the high-ranking, the high-level ones. I don't even remember the last names of each and every one of them. Well, do you remember, do you think that we try to collect compromising material on each and every single one of them? Well, it's difficult to imagine another nonsense of a bigger scale than this. Well, please just disregard these issues and don't think about this anymore again.
And I have to say, if they had it, it would have been out long ago. And if anybody watched Peter Strzok testify over the last couple of days, and I was in Brussels watching it, it was a disgrace to the FBI, it was a disgrace to our country, and you would say that was a total witch hunt. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
You were just watching President Trump's joint news conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki. I'm joined by Yahoo Finance editor-in-chief Andy Serwer, also joined by Julia LaRoche. And we just heard some pretty strong statements from both President Trump and Vladimir Putin. Andy, what is your reaction to? Let's first start with his comments on the Russian meddling. He didn't denounce Russia for its interference at all.
Yeah, I mean, just taking a step back, I have to say, Shauna, that was one of the most extraordinary press conferences I've ever seen in my entire life. And it was just like a bizarro parallel universe of two guys spinning things that to a large degree were untrue. And it was spinning things together, cooperating in a way that is unimaginable that a Russian leader and an American leader would do together, to my mind. And then to get back to your specific point, which I think is a very good question, President Trump, I have watched him, we've all watched him bash friends, foes, the leader of Canada, the leader of France, the leader of Great Britain, the leader of China, relentlessly. Now, true, sometimes he goes back and forth. He'll compliment them, but he will bash them. Here, he didn't say a single negative thing about Russia or Vladimir Putin. The harshest thing that he said that I heard was, "We've both done bad things." Amazing that this was the harshest criticism that he could levy against Putin and Russia. And
why do you think that is? Why do you think he was very hesitant to place any blame on Putin?
Well, that's the big question of our time. And, you know, conspiracists and Democrats and liberals and people on the other side of the aisle believe that there is collusion, there's cooperation between these two, and or you heard that last question, that the Russians have compromising material about him. And of course, the other theory is that Donald Trump wants to do business in Russia either now or afterwards, after he's president. Or maybe he just has a man crush on Vladimir Putin. I mean, it's hard to fathom. And, you know, on the one hand, you know, a little bit of a reality check for Andy Serwer. It is very important that the leader of Russia and the United States have a dialogue, that they engage, even that they have a good relationship where they can express opinions to each other. But this seems to be, to my mind, a bit too far.
I think you touched upon something really important, and that was President Trump's tweet saying that it was also U.S. foolishness. But hey, guess what? The U.S. didn't invade Ukraine. The U.S. didn't cheat in the Olympics like Russia did. And the U.S. didn't meddle in the elections like Russia did. We just saw that indictment that came out. So that just seems a little bizarre to me. I think if you asked most Americans, do you feel it was foolishness on our side, they would say no.
Well, it's interesting, too, Shauna. He says that, you know, when he talks about we've never had worse relations than Russia than we do today. Our relations are worse. Well, wait a second. Aren't you president? In other words, it's on you. So on the one hand, for instance, when the economy is doing great right now and the stock market is doing great, he'll take credit for that. But when it comes to Russia, no, that has everything to do with my predecessors. I'm not responsible for that at all. That's another bizarre thing. But you think that maybe he would say that relations are great. And in some instances, he says that relations are great, for instance, when it comes to the military. which is just another sort of fabrication. I mean, is it true that the Russian military and the U.S. military talks to each other like, be careful, we're sending some planes over here? You know, there is a little of that, like, let's not start a hot war. But I mean, they're not friendly. Friendly with the Russian military.
Well, Julia, what do you think will happen? So we have President Trump not taking a hard line with Putin here, very opposite to what Andy's point was, that he was taking with NATO leaders, with leaders of Europe or Canada over the past several weeks. What type of message does this send to our allies?
You know, he's calling our allies in the EU foes, which is just so bizarre. Those were the first ones he pointed to as being foes, and we have a lot of great allies. And when you hear rhetoric like this, it just doesn't put the U.S. in a really good position, in a strong position, because we do have great allies worldwide, and it just probably doesn't bode well.
A couple of comments to a couple of quotes that maybe we should highlight. One, he referred to Vladimir Putin several times as a good competitor. Again, that was sort of the harshest thing he could say about Vladimir Putin. And then when asked, did he think the Russians were responsible or did they meddle in the 2016 election, Trump said, I don't see any reason why it would be them. Them being Russia, to be perfectly clear. I don't see any reason why it would be.
Yeah, and Trump also said, just to highlight some of the other lines that he said, he was saying that the U.S. relationship with Russia changed as of today. So as of today, it is different than it was in the past. He also said that he wants Russia wants to end the nuclear proliferation, also saying that he wants to solve every one of the problems discussed today. So those are the problems between President Trump and Vladimir Putin that were discussed. He's saying he wants to see all of those problems solved.
And just to reiterate, if this Vladimir and Donald show is something we're going to be seeing on an ongoing basis, I mean, be afraid. And, you know, I just feel like these two guys spinning the rest of the world is something that I'm not comfortable with.
Well, Andy, that's a really good point. Where do you think it goes from here? What do you think the next couple steps could look like?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of outcome here. I mean, I just feel like it gives Vladimir Putin, you know, a lot of comfort that he has room to do what he wants to do. But I don't see Russia and the United States cooperating. I mean, I think there's a lot of work for them to do in the Middle East in particular to resolve the Syrian crisis and help the refugees there, for instance, is, you know, would be a tremendous accomplishment. But you know, treaties, deals, I don't think there's a whole lot that's going to happen. But it does suggest that these two will be chatting again soon, and that's what Donald Trump said. He said, I hope we talk again soon and often. Yeah,
well, we will certainly be monitoring any additional comments that come out of the meeting, and also we'll see if President Trump takes to Twitter like he always does and tweets out some more thoughts that he didn't get to share yet. All right, well, the trade showdown continues. China has filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization challenging President Trump's plan to add tariffs on an additional $200 billion worth of Chinese goods. Now, what's China's rationale for filing this complaint, Julia? Why do you think they took this step, and what does it mean for the next step in the escalating trade war between the U.S. and China?
Look, China's obviously not happy with the tariffs that they've seen, and they have more at stake. We import more Chinese goods than we export over there, so there's definitely more at stake. And the World Trade Organization member countries can file these complaints to settle these disputes, and this is just one way to, I guess, escalate this issue and have it, I guess, debated out through the World Trade Organization.
And there's been, the IMF just came out with a report earlier today saying that if all the tariffs that have been threatened, if they do go into effect, it could reduce the global economy by 0.5 percentage point. Andy, while that might not be, we don't know how probable that outcome will be, but how concerning is this for the future of global growth?
Well, everyone's concerned about it, Shauna, and, you know, chief executives here in the United States have been warning the president and speaking out about that. And with regard to China, just going back to what Julia was saying, I spoke to some Chinese trade officials a couple months ago when this was sort of brewing, and they indicated, you know, that the framework of the WTO was something that they were going to pursue, that, you know, we had these mechanisms in place. So it's not surprising to me at all. And, you know, this is a way to court the public opinion globally by doing this and sort of appearing very rational. But I think that, you know, again, these trade tremors are starting to be felt more and more in the global economy, and the implications are potentially dangerous.
And we really haven't seen all that much reaction in the market yet, and markets do not like uncertainty. But one interesting point that the IMF did point out was that the U.S. would be in a vulnerable, an especially vulnerable position, as how they put it, because at the end of the day, we could be isolating ourselves and be hit with all those retaliatory tariffs from not only in China, but also coming out of the EU.
Which could have a large impact on our economy as well as the market.
And driving China and the EU together, of course, and that's what's happening as we speak.
Yeah, they're holding a
Especially calling
summit
them
right
foes.
now.
Right.
I know. Yeah, President Trump called both the EU and then also China foes here over the last day. Well, let's take a look at the market action and see how things are shaping up. We have the Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq all trading just slightly lower. The Nasdaq is down 0.2 of a percentage point, as well as the S&P. Keith Bliss of Drive Wealth is standing by on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Keith, we have stocks pulling back after a 2-week rally. Financials are holding on to gains thanks to Bank of America and BlackRock's beat on earnings. Where do you see the markets headed right now with so much uncertainty in the markets?
Well, as long as the trade war talk continues to be moderate or not really being paid attention so much, or it doesn't escalate to what you folks were just talking about, I think we see the market trade higher. There's lots of patterns that have emerged inside of the market which suggest that it will trade higher. We do have a critical point that we need to watch on the small caps, the Russell 2000 index. It really needs to get back to its all-time high around 1708 and break through that for me to have complete comfort that we will trade higher. But all the signs that we're seeing, the fact that second quarter earnings are estimated to come in at a 20% year-over-year growth rate, and how we trail through, and that the Fed, the Jerome Powell Fed, while they're being more hawkish than we've seen over the last 10 years, they're trying to moderate this and thread the needle just right through the end of 2018. I think, again, assuming that the trade war rhetoric does not escalate out of control, the markets will trade higher, not only because of the second quarter earnings reports that we're getting, and we're now deep inside of that report, those reports on the calendar, but just because of all the linkage that we see, corporate profits, again, the effect of the tax cuts are starting to kick in. People are still spending money. We saw a very good retail sales report today, and all that bodes well for a higher market going into the back half of this year.
Keith, I also want to get your take on what's going on in the crypto markets today. Bitcoin is in the green, up over 4.5% after BlackRock's Larry Fink said in an interview with Reuters that it is evaluating cryptocurrencies, that is BlackRock. This comes after the CEO had previously called Bitcoin a, quote, index of money laundering. What do you think, what sign is he sending to Wall Street? And is this maybe a sign that Wall Street is serious about crypto?
Well, if you actually dig into the report a little bit, BlackRock's actually been looking at, or studying, as they say, studying cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin for the last 3 years. So the comments from Larry Fink and others are slightly reminiscent of Jamie Dimon, what he said last year. He said it was a big fraud and a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme or whatever he said along those lines. I think what we're seeing is that the institutional embrace of cryptocurrencies is finally happening. Since 2017, there's been about 176 crypto hedge funds that have been created. That's mammoth growth inside of that. And as you see more Wall Street and institutional money come into the cryptocurrency space, it does have the tendency to start creating some bubbles in some cases, but it also starts to legitimize that as a medium of exchange that people will be able to use, maybe not tomorrow at your gas station, but farther down the road, I think you will see that. We're also starting to see governments embrace cryptocurrencies and think about issuing their own currency. Certainly, that would be beneficial, especially if it's like a gold-backed currency from some third world nation, where then their trading partners could have comfort that the currency would actually be worth something when they do the trading. So the mere fact that BlackRock has now, it's either been uncovered or they've now come out and said that they're looking at it. We have all the big banks that are employing blockchain technologies across several lines in their back office and their front office. And they're all taking a look at how they can either set up trading desks, issue currencies, issue tokens, do securitized token offerings. This is the next great wave of corporate finance and capitalism.